One of the biggest pricing decisions you'll ever make as an interior designer isn't on your design fee. It's how you price the products you specify. Now, every designer seems to have a very different opinion on this. Some pass their trade discount straight onto the client, some keep the full retail margin, others apply their own markup. And if you're anything like the designers I've been speaking to lately, you're probably wondering, what's the right approach here? What's the most consistent approach I can follow? Well, after speaking with more than, I'd say, 70 solo interior designers over the past 12 months, I've realized most people are looking for that perfect markup percentage. So in this episode, I'll show you how to think about trade pricing and markup differently, why there isn't a magic percentage, and how your profit margin, not somebody else's pricing, should ultimately determine whether you increase your markup, pass on more of that trade discount, or change your pricing philosophy altogether. So, what is trade pricing? Let's start with the basics. Bear with me if I'm stating the obvious, I know, but I'm going to go back to basics here to begin with. Trade pricing is simply a discounted price offered by suppliers to industry professionals. So furniture companies, lighting suppliers, fabric houses, and wallpaper brands may all offer trade pricing because designers influence purchasing decisions and can generate repeat business. So it's a commercial relationship between the supplier and the designer. But this is where designers start taking very different approaches. As I've said in the beginning, some designers pass every cent of the trade discount onto their clients. Some retain the entire difference between trade and recommended retail pricing. Others share part of the discount with the client. Now, none of these approaches is automatically right or wrong. I just want to say that. What matters is understanding why you've chosen your particular approach and whether it supports the profitability of your business. Now, with many furniture and lighting products, we know the recommended retail price. As the designer, you then need to decide how much of the difference between your trade cost and the retail price, if any, you're going to pass on to your client. Okay, so what is markup? Markup's slightly different. Again, I'm going back to the basics here. Markup's the amount you add to your purchase cost before selling the product to your client. So for example, perhaps you're specifying a fabric that costs you $100 per metre or yard at trade. You might apply your standard markup, if you have one, to that cost before presenting the client price. This is different from a product where there is an obvious recommended retail price that the client can find online. With fabrics, wallpapers, and other specialised products, the public may not always be able to log on to a website and immediately see an exact retail cost. However, we also need to recognise that some fabric suppliers, for example, and showrooms do sell directly to the public, normally online. So it isn't always difficult for clients to find pricing information. It's also not unusual for fabrics and other products to be sold at close to double the original wholesale or trade cost when sold through retail. Now, this is actually a good thing because most designers aren't charging 100% above the trade pricing in most scenarios. So that gives us room to decide on an appropriate markup. But of course, it doesn't always mean you should automatically double every price. So your markup needs to make commercial sense within your own business. So how much should you mark up? Now we reach the question everyone wants answered. How much should you charge? So you'll hear designers mention all sorts of percentages. You know, I charge up, or I mark up at standard 20% or 25%, or I'm 30% on furniture and 35% or 50% on fabric, sometimes even more. Most designers use a cost plus pricing. Now, after speaking with many designers, I've come to one firm conclusion. There isn't one perfect percentage. So be cautious when someone tells you that every designer should charge, exactly 30% on this, 35% on that, or any other fixed number. Pricing isn't just about the product or an industry standard most of our designer girlfriends are using. It's about your entire business model. It's about covering your overheads, achieving your financial goals, and the profit required to keep your business operating. The percentage itself isn't the goal. It's the financial outcome for yourself and your business. That is the goal. And please don't choose your pricing because a few designer friends told you what they're charging over coffee and everyone kind of agrees on 1%. There is no universal legislation stating that every interior designer must use the same markup. So from an integrity perspective, most of us just want to make sure that we're not charging above a retail price the client could obtain for themselves. Your friends may have a completely different overhead, different services, income requirements, and project structures. So the real issue again is whether your pricing is generating the profit for your business, the type of profit you actually need. So base your pricing on what your business needs to generate that healthy profit, not simply on what somebody else happens to be doing in their business. Leave that aside. Now, I've created a free profit guide to help you work through it if you need it. It includes guidance on calculating your own hourly rate, understanding how you actually calculate your own profit margin, and choosing your own pricing, which includes, what should my markup look like for my business and what part of my trade discount should I share, if any. So we're basing it on your business rather than somebody else's or any of that other online babble that's going on about what everybody else is choosing. So if you'd like the guide, you can download it at turnkeydesign.com/profit guide, or if you're listening on the podcast, or just scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. So inside the guide, I also introduced two fictional designers, Stress Sally and Calm Claire. They are both equally talented and create beautiful homes, blah, blah, blah. But one consistently makes money while the other's constantly stressed out and changing paths constantly with each design job. Do you know anybody that's in that predicament? I bet you do. So let's now use Sally and Claire in the markup discussion so we can get a clear picture of where some decorators or designers are going very right and some are going very wrong. So let's start with Stress Sally. Let's meet Sally. So Sally begins confidently enough. She's got a $300 cushion. So she applies a 30% markup on that one. Easy. A $1,500 coffee table, still 30%, no problem. Then she specifies this really cool $12,000 sofa, but suddenly she panics and she thinks, oh, I can't possibly charge 30% on something like that. It's going to be so expensive to the client. So she reduces her percentage to just 10% on that sofa. The following week, she specifies an expensive fabric. Got to have this fabric. Maybe it's a Kelly Wearstler fabric. Again, she feels a bit guilty. This time, she removes the markup completely. Do you notice what's happening here? Sally's no longer following a pricing philosophy. She's negotiating with herself. Every expensive item makes her feel uncomfortable. Every proposal becomes this emotional to and fro with herself. Instead of making commercial decisions based on the needs of her business, she's reacting to how the final dollar figure makes her feel. So as a result, her profitability becomes completely unpredictable. She might earn an acceptable profit on one project and almost nothing on the next. So let's talk about Calm Claire now. Let's have a look at Claire. Before Claire begins quoting, she establishes her pricing philosophy. She understands her business costs. She knows the profit she needs to generate, which if you don't know what the industry standard is, one your accountant would be comfortable with, a good guide for you would be between 30 to 40% profit margin on any of your design jobs. So she selects a consistent markup that supports that goal. Then she applies it. Whether she's specifying a cushion, a coffee table, or a premium sofa, she doesn't panic simply because the dollar amount becomes larger. That doesn't mean Claire never changes her pricing. She absolutely does adjust it, but she reviews it after she finishes that project. She then asks herself, did this project achieve the profit I expected? Did my pricing adequately cover my overheads? Was I paid for all the work involved? Am I reaching the margin my business really needs, that 30 to 40%? If the answer is no, Claire can update her pricing for the next project. She can change her profit margin, her markup. She doesn't suddenly, though, change it halfway through a current proposal because one expensive product made her feel uncomfortable. Get where I'm going with this? That's the difference between having a pricing strategy and simply reacting So, why does consistency matter here? Well, it definitely does. One benefit of a consistent markup that designers don't discuss enough is how much simpler it makes your quoting process. So, let's say your standard markup's 30%. Every applicable product can be entered into your design or procurement software using the same percentage. You're no longer stopping at every item and wondering, should this be 20%? Maybe this one should be 35. The sofa's expensive, so maybe I'll just reduce the markup to 10%. Constantly changing the percentages takes more time. It also creates more opportunities to second guess yourself and make mistakes. Having a standard percentage doesn't mean you're trapped into that number forever. It simply means you have a clear process for the current project. Consistency also builds confidence. The other benefit is that you have that confidence. When you already established your pricing philosophy before you begin the quoting process, you stop negotiating with yourself throughout the process. You know, this is how I price my projects. So that confidence comes across when you communicate with clients also. When you constantly change those percentages, you begin distrusting your own pricing. You start thinking, am I charging too much here? Perhaps I'll quietly take something off here. But before long, you're discounting yourself, even though the client never asked you to. And remember, you don't necessarily need to tell the client your markup percentage. Personally, I don't recommend opening that conversation unless there's a genuine reason to do so. Explaining every percentage can create an unnecessary can of worms. It can open a can of worms, particularly when clients assume every product has a simple and visible retail price, and normally they do. You can simply explain that you apply a consistent pricing structure to the products you source and supply. So, what's my pricing philosophy? So, where do I personally sit? Now, I generally don't pass on any trade pricing. Instead, I work with a consistent markup philosophy. So, that percentage at the time of recording this episode, by the way, is 30% markup on trade pricing. That means I don't renegotiate with myself every time an expensive product appears in the proposal. I apply my established pricing structure and then review the financial performance of that project once it's been completed. If I'm consistently making less profit than the business requires, then I'll adjust my pricing for future projects, including my markup. But I don't change it simply because one particular product makes me feel uncomfortable. Consistency has given me a far more confident approach than chasing the perfect percentage ever did. So your challenge now will be, before you price your next project, I'd like you to do one thing. Go back and look at your most recent income you made from your last project. Then ask yourself an honest question. Did I have a clear pricing philosophy? Or did I keep changing my markup because certain products made me feel a bit uncomfortable? Because when you're constantly changing your pricing, you aren't really following a strategy. You're reacting all the time, and that is really exhausting. Don't worry, I've been there. So the right markup isn't necessarily 20% or 30%, 35% or 50%. The right markup is the one that supports your service, covers your costs, and helps your business create that healthy profit. So go ahead and choose it intentionally and apply it consistently. Then review it based on real project results, not just fear along the way. So again, you can download my free Solo Interior Designer's Profit Guide using the link below to learn more about profit margins and pricing and the difference between being a stressed Sally and a calm Claire. And if you've found this episode helpful, subscribe to Turnkey Design Talk, the podcast, or YouTube. Every week I share practical advice to help solo interior designers build more profitable, sustainable turnkey businesses. So thank you for listening or watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.